Hey guys, today we're going to dive headfirst into the glorious chaos that was ancient Rome. Not that postcard Rome, you know, with white marble statues and epic speeches in British accents. No, we're talking about the real Rome, a sweaty, noisy, chaotic city full of ambition, street cats, political intrigue, and a suspicious amount of fermented fish sauce. This is everyday life in the Roman Empire. From the thundering forum, the tangled staircases of Subura. So before we begin our time travel adventure, hit that like button like a gladiator hungry for glory. Subscribe if you're into deep dives into history with just a pinch of sass. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's go on vacation to a place where togas were in vogue and running water was a luxury. Because while Rome wasn't built in a day, we're about to live in it for one epic night. When someone says ancient Rome, you probably envision epic chariot races, philosophical beards, and Caesar clutching his chest, panting, et tu, brute? But for ordinary Romans, life meant trying not to get crushed in the marketplace, arguing with the landlord, and praying the neighbors wouldn't throw another pot out the window. Let's transport ourselves to Rome in its heyday, the 1st century AD, a city of over 1 million souls. That's right, 1 million. In a world where most cities were the size of your local Costco on a Saturday afternoon, Rome was a mega metropolis. Imagine New York City if it were louder, smellier, and had more gods per square foot. The first thing you notice? The noise. Rome is a 24-hour sensory assault. The shouts of street hawkers, the clatter of wheels on cobblestones, the ragged performances of musicians and drunks playing out battles outside taverns. And don't forget the heralds. Human news alerts, shouting out headlines because, surprise, surprise, no one has invented Twitter yet. And your apartment? Paper-thin walls, wooden shutters, and zero insulation. I hope you enjoy hearing everything your upstairs neighbor is doing. Yeah, everything. Speaking of apartments, welcome to the Insula. Basically ancient Rome's attempt at affordable housing. In these high-rise buildings, families, shopkeepers, and all manner of strange uncles crammed into glorified fire traps. If you were well off, you lived at the very bottom, close to water, bakeries, and a sweet opportunity to escape if the building caught fire, which it often did. Poor people? 5th floor or higher. No elevators. Just stairs, endless, creaking stairs. The walls were thin enough to hear your neighbors sneeze. Bathrooms? Hilariously rare. You either went to a public restroom, where privacy was a myth, used a chamber pot, or used the old climb out the window first and scream method. Classic Roman courtesy. Shout before you splash. Garbage collection? Please. Garbage was often thrown out the window too. Streets turned into compost heaps, obstacle courses, and rat pits. But hey, at least there were public water fountains. If you didn't mind sharing water with a goat. And, needless to say, the smell. Rome smelled of ambition, armpits, incense, donkey sweat, and something else you couldn't identify. Spoiler, it was probably garum. But Rome had its swanky moments too. The Forum was like Rome's version of Times Square. Politics, business, religion, and the occasional public scandal, all in one place. Marble everywhere. Senators strut around like peacocks, priests at sacrifice, philosophers arguing in togas, while someone in the background rips off a tourist. the peak of civilization. Now let's talk about food. Forget pizza and pasta. That's modern Italy. The ancient Romans were obsessed with garum, a fish sauce that smelled like Poseidon's gym socks and tasted like salty regret. They smeared it on everything: bread, meat, vegetables, and even fruit. All in all, if ketchup had a weird nautical cousin, this was it. Breakfast, bread, and maybe wine, because the water was questionable. Lunch, maybe leftovers. Dinner is where things got serious, if you were rich. Multi-course feasts, reclining couches, live music, and finger food long before it was cool. Poor people? Cereal porridge, lentils, stale bread, and, you guessed it, garum. Yum. Entertainment? Rome delivered. The Colosseum was like the NFL, Coachella, and a horror movie all rolled into one. Gladiators, wild animals, mock sea battles, sometimes all in one day. It held 50,000 people, and admission was often free, if you knew someone or didn't mind waiting in line for a week. Instead of popcorn, sausages on sticks, and wine by the bucketful. For a more serious vibe, Romans hit the public baths. Imagine a gym, spa, barbershop, and gossip center all in one. You exercised, bathed, swam in different pools, and exchanged gossip while remaining as naked as was socially acceptable. Forget LinkedIn. This was real networking. Religion? Oh, they had gods. So many gods. Jupiter, Mars, Venus, plus imports from every culture they steamrolled. Omens were everywhere. Bird flies left instead of right? Cancel your travel plans. Sneezed at the wrong moment? Bad omen. Stub your toe on a temple step? That's a sacrifice waiting to happen. But the real Rome, it wasn't just emperors and epic battles. It was the people. Bakers shouting about fresh loaves, kids chasing chickens, laundry flapping from balconies, fishmongers haggling over squid, and slaves running the whole show in the background. Rome's foundation wasn't marble. It was human sweat. Politics? Oh, the drama. Senators in spotless togas trash-talking each other behind olive trees. Emperors declaring themselves divine one week and getting poisoned the next. It was like a soap opera with better architecture. And those roads? Legendary. Roman roads were engineering masterpieces, straight as arrows, sturdy enough to last centuries, and built so soldiers could march efficiently while complaining about their sandals. Aqueducts? Oh, you mean ancient pipelines that delivered clean water from miles away, using nothing but gravity and genius? Yeah, Rome did that too. So while your fifth-floor apartment might reek of garum and damp laundry, at least you had access to a fountain. Maybe. We're just getting warmed up. Stick around as we dig into Roman fashion. Spoiler, stylish, but impractical. Hygiene? Also impractical. Medicine? Equal parts herbs and hope. We'll cover crime, punishment, curses, romance, heartbreak, and how to survive a dinner party with someone who thinks they're the next Augustus. So kick back, and let's keep roaming through Rome. Because this isn't just history. It's a living, breathing, absurdly fascinating look at what it meant to be human 2,000 years ago. Welcome to Rome. Homes, streets, and neighbors, where chaos meets architecture. All right, so you've just landed in ancient Rome. You survived the Forum, dodged a chamber pot, maybe even scored a free sausage at the Colosseum. But now it's time to go home. Except home in Rome was less cozy living space and more concrete shoebox with questionable plumbing. Let's talk real estate Roman style. First, the good news. There's housing for everyone. Now the bad news. It's almost all terrible. Unless you're filthy rich and have a private villa with mosaics, gardens, and a personal slave just for adjusting your sandals, you're probably stuck in an insula, the Roman version of an apartment complex. If your apartment complex were built entirely out of hope and flammable materials, these buildings were tall. We're talking 5 to 7 stories. No elevators, no handrails. Just rickety wooden stairs that doubled as leg day. Rich folks lived on the lower floors, close to fresh bread and a fast exit in case of fire. Poorer folks, top floor. Hope you like hiking with your groceries. Oh, and fun fact, if your building caught fire, which happened a lot, you didn't call 911. You screamed out the window and hoped someone with a bucket was feeling heroic. Now let's step outside. The Roman streets? Absolute madness. Imagine New York City traffic, but with more donkeys and less horn etiquette. The streets were narrow, uneven, and covered in, well, everything. Animal poop, trash, leftover food, and the occasional very confused goat. Sidewalks existed, but not everywhere. Sometimes you just had to hope the chariot barreling toward you had decent brakes. And cleanliness? Rome was many things, but sterile wasn't one of them. Public toilets were a thing, sure, but they were social hangouts. Picture this. You and your buddies, side by side on a stone bench with holes, chatting about gladiator fights while doing your business. Privacy? Who needs it when you've got friendship and shared sponges? Speaking of which, yes, the sponge stick was real. Romans used communal sponges on a stick, rinsed in salt water. They were stored like you'd store kitchen utensils. Do not think about this too hard. Now, about your neighbors. Living in Rome meant living stacked on top of each other. You knew what they were eating, when they were fighting, and what their dogs sounded like at 2 a.m. Arguments over noise, constant. But also, community was tight. People looked out for each other, gossiped about each other, borrowed vinegar, and sometimes never gave it back. Ancient petty drama, alive and well. Some neighborhoods were better than others. Subura, for instance, Rome's chaotic heart. It was the party district, the slum, the red light zone, and the food court, all rolled into one. You could buy dinner, lose your wallet, get into a philosophical debate, and maybe witness a minor crime, all on the same block. But that was the magic of Rome. Vibrant, crowded, a little stinky, always noisy, and totally alive. Because behind all the marble monuments and heroic statues was a city full of everyday people just trying to survive another day without getting mugged by a pickpocket or squashed by an ox cart. So yeah, Roman homes were kind of terrible. The streets were chaotic and the neighbors were noisy. But it all added up to a kind of messy brilliance. Like a giant, living organism, pulsing with life, attitude, and a distinct aroma of garum and goat hair. Ready to explore the next layer? Let's dive into Roman fashion and hygiene. Two things they tried really hard at, with mixed results. Fashion and filth, style and hygiene in ancient Rome. All right, let's talk fashion. Because nothing says powerful empire, like sweating through 5 layers of linen while trying to look fabulous. When you picture a Roman, you're probably imagining a regal toga, sculpted abs, and windswept hair like they just stepped out of a shampoo commercial. Reality? Slightly messier. Let's start with the toga. The toga was the Roman version of a 3-piece suit. If your suit was basically a heavy bedsheet that took 20 minutes to wrap and made sitting down feel like origami. Togas were mostly for citizen men and only for special occasions, like lawsuits, elections, or yelling at someone in the forum. Everyday wear? Too much hassle. You'd wear a tunic, basically a long shirt. Easy, breezy, unisex. And don't worry, tunics came in all colors, as long as it was off-white, or beige, or slightly browner beige. Occasionally purple, if you were rich, or the emperor. Wearing too much purple without permission? Yeah, that could get you executed. No joke. Women's fashion, layers, and logistics. Roman women rocked stolas, long draped dresses, often with a second layer, the palla, draped over the shoulders. It was like living wrapped in curtains, elegant curtains, heavy, hot curtains. Try chasing kids in that. Jewelry was big, literally. Gold, pearls, hairpins that could also be used as emergency weapons. Roman hairstyles? Intricate enough to require a team. Wealthy women had enslaved hairdressers called ornatrices, basically full-time glam squads. Men's hairstyles? Short and manly. Beards went in and out of fashion depending on which emperor was trending. Julius Caesar? Clean-shaven. Marcus Aurelius? Beard game strong. Now let's talk hygiene, if we must. Here's the thing. Romans cared about hygiene. They just had different ideas about it. Yes, they had public baths and aqueducts. Yes, they oiled themselves up and scraped the gunk off with curved metal tools called strigils. Kind of like exfoliating, if exfoliating involved olive oil and sharing a sponge with a stranger. Wait, did I say sponge? Yes, because Romans didn't have toilet paper. They had a communal sponge on a stick, shared, rinsed in a bucket of salty vinegar water between uses. Suddenly those bathhouse fees don't sound so bad, do they? Teeth? Freshish. Toothpaste was DIY. Popular ingredients: ashes, charcoal, crushed bones, oyster shells, and sometimes, brace yourself, urine. Yep, human pee. It was used as a mouthwash and tooth whitener. Why? Because ammonia. Science, baby. Did it work? Kind of. Did it smell great? No, definitely not. Smell you later. Perfume was huge. Everyone wore it. Sometimes to smell nice. Mostly to cover up the stench of the city, which was a cocktail of sweat, animals, cooking fires, mystery sludge in the streets, and fermented fish sauce. Yes, garum made another appearance. It was in the air, on your food, possibly on your tunic. You couldn't escape it. Garum was the old spice of Rome, but fishier, shaving and grooming. Roman men took shaving seriously. Barbershops were everywhere and doubled as hangout spots. Think, your local barbershop, but with more statues and less hip-hop. They plucked eyebrows. They trimmed nose hair. They had tweezers, razors, and sometimes painful accidents. Even armpits were groomed. No one wanted to look like a barbarian, which in Roman terms meant hairy and angry and bad at architecture. Laundry? Questionable. Romans did laundry, sort of. They had fullers, basically ancient dry cleaners. How'd they get clothes white? Ammonia again. Which means, yes, urine was used to wash clothes. And not just any urine, publicly collected urine. There were literal pee pots placed around the city where people could contribute. Rome even taxed urine collection. That's how seriously they took it. And you thought your laundry smelled bad. So next time you're struggling with your laundry pile or thinking your morning routine is a chore, just be glad you're not scrubbing your tunic in pea water or sharing a bathroom sponge with 5 strangers. Roman life was filthy, fabulous, and full of effort. Looking good wasn't easy, but at least you were doing it under marble statues and not fluorescent lights. Up next, let's talk medicine, illness, and how Romans tried, and sometimes failed, to survive everything from stubbed toes to plague rats. Ready? Let's keep going. Rome waits for no one, especially not the sick. Medicine, madness, and mystery cures. Staying alive in ancient Rome. All right, time to talk about staying healthy in a city where everything, from spoiled fish sauce to runaway ox carts, was trying to kill you. Doctors? More like bold guessers. Rome had doctors, sure. Some were trained in Greek medicine, others just kind of winged it with herbs and confidence. If you were rich, you got a house call. If you were poor, well, you just hoped the gods liked you. And let's be honest, a lot of Roman medicine was less science and more vibes. Feel sick? Maybe you've got too much black bile, or not enough. Or maybe Mars is angry. Either way, here's some crushed snails and a prayer. Surgery? Hold still and bite this. Romans could perform surgeries, amputations, cataract removal, even dental work. But anesthesia? Not really a thing. Best case? Some strong wine and a friend to hold you down. Worst case? You pass out from pain and everyone agrees that was for the best. They had scalpels, forceps, bone drills. Basically a medieval toolbox of nightmares. Sanitizing equipment? Optional. Germ theory? Not invented yet. Hope? Highly recommended. Hospitals? Sort of. There were military hospitals for soldiers, cleanish, organized, and honestly, way ahead of their time. Civilians? Not so lucky. If you were sick, you stayed home, or went to a temple, or just laid down dramatically and waited to either recover or become a cautionary tale. Pharmaceuticals? You mean magic potions? Roman pharmacies were basically the sketchiest wellness shops you can imagine. Here's what they were selling. Crushed emeralds. Fancy, but totally useless. Ground up wolf liver. Extra protein, maybe? Fennel, garlic, and honey. Honestly, not the worst combo. And spells. Yep, real spells, with incantations, amulets, and, wait for it, magic beans. If none of that worked, they'd do some bloodletting to balance your humors. Because nothing says healing like willingly getting stabbed. Plagues, parasites, and public panic. Rome dealt with some serious pandemics, like the Antonine Plague, which was probably smallpox and definitely a huge nightmare. Since they didn't know how to stop it, they did what any stressed-out empire would do. Blamed foreigners, prayed harder, and made more sacrifices. Parasites were everywhere. Tapeworms, lice, fleas. Your body was basically an all-you-can-eat buffet for creepy crawlies. Faith in the gods and the goat guts. Sometimes, Medicine meant going to the temple of Asclepius, the god of healing, and sleeping there overnight, hoping for a divine diagnosis. Priests might read omens and bird flights, dreams, or, if you were lucky, goat entrails. No pressure at all. Bottom line, Roman healthcare was a wild mix of herbal remedies, gutsy surgeries, pun totally intended, religious rituals, and, honestly, a lot of guesswork. And yet somehow, people survived. Some even thrived. So next time you're stuck waiting at urgent care or complaining about your copay, just remember, at least no one's treating your cough with boiled mouse water and an eagle feather blessing. All right, buckle up. It's time to talk about Roman food. And when I say food, I mean some seriously weird stuff that makes modern-day hot dogs look gourmet. If you think pizza and pasta were ancient Roman staples, surprise. That's a big nope. Those delicious Italian classics came much, much later. So what were Romans actually stuffing their faces with? Let's dive in. The star of the show, garum. First, meet the MVP of Roman cuisine, garum. Imagine if fish sauce and gym socks had a baby raised by a salt shaker. That's garum. This fishy condiment was everywhere. On bread, meat, vegetables, even fruit. Romans loved it so much they probably bathed in it. Okay, maybe not, but you get the idea. Smell-wise? Let's just say if you could bottle the smell of ancient Rome, it would be garum with a hint of what died in the forum. Breakfast. Simple and sometimes sad. Most Romans started their day with bread, the ancient version of toast, sometimes dipped in wine because water was sketchy. Protein? Not usually. If you were rich, you might have some cheese or fruit. But for most, it was bread, bread, and more bread. Lunch. Leftovers and more bread. Lunch was usually a quick affair. Maybe some leftover porridge or cold vegetables. And guess what? More bread. Dinner. The real show. Now dinner was where the Roman food scene got interesting. And sometimes downright bizarre. Rich Romans had multi-course feasts with exotic dishes like dormice stuffed with minced meat and nuts. Yes, actual dormice. Little rodents turned into appetizers. Flamingo tongues, because why not? Peacock, ostrich, and other fancy birds served up just to say, look at me, I'm rich and I eat weird stuff. The poor? Well, porridge, lentils, and stale bread with a generous splash of garum. Yum. Weird sides and snacks. Romans loved their snacks. But beware. Moridum. A pungent cheese spread mixed with herbs and garlic. If you love garlic bread, great. If not, run. Seafood galore. Oysters, mussels, and anything that could be pulled out of the Mediterranean and slathered in garum. Snails. Romans were basically the original escargot fans. Fruit and veggies. Romans ate plenty of fruits and veggies, but not like we do today. Many vegetables were bitter or tough. They'd cook or pickle them. But hey, no microwave magic back then. Sweet treats. Desserts were rare and usually simple. Honey was the main sweetener. No refined sugar here. They loved dried fruits, sometimes made cakes with nuts and cheese. Drinks. Wine, and more wine. Romans loved their wine. It was often watered down because straight-up wine was too strong, and sometimes flavored with herbs and spices. Water? If you were lucky, it came from one of those fancy aqueducts. If not, you drank whatever was handy, which sometimes led to interesting consequences. So next time you're grabbing a burger or a slice of pizza, be grateful it doesn't come with dormice or flamingo tongues. Ancient Roman cuisine was adventurous, to say the least. Stick around, because up next we're diving into entertainment, gladiators, chariot races, and why Romans loved a good blood sport more than your average Friday night game. All right, grab your popcorn, or maybe a sausage on a stick, because Roman entertainment was wild. Forget Netflix and chill. These guys were all about gladiators, chariot races, and enough drama to put reality TV to shame. The Colosseum, the ultimate sports arena. The Colosseum was basically ancient Rome's version of a Super Bowl, Coachella, and horror movie marathon all rolled into one. It could seat around 50,000 screaming fans. Entry? Usually free. Because why charge when you've got emperors sponsoring the show? Gladiators fought like warriors, but also kind of like ancient rock stars. They had fan clubs, nicknames, and their own version of Instagram followers. Well, if Instagram existed. Gladiator battles, the OG reality show. Gladiators were mostly slaves, prisoners, or volunteers who wanted glory and maybe a better afterlife. Their fights were brutal, often bloody, and sometimes ended in dramatic mercy from the crowd or emperor. Think of it like a very violent, very live-action MMA fight, but with swords, spears, and sometimes wild animals. Chariot races, the Fast and the Furious, Roman edition. Next up, the Circus Maximus. This was Rome's massive racetrack, holding around 250,000 people. Yes, 250,000. Charioteers raced in teams, whipping their horses and each other around a dirt track at breakneck speeds. Crashes were common, and fans were super intense. Think NASCAR, but with more togas and fewer seatbelts. Other spectacles, mock naval battles. The Romans actually flooded arenas for these water fights. So if you thought your local water park was cool, think again. Animal hunts, lions, bears, elephants, and more. Brought in to entertain the crowd, and sometimes to meet their doom. Public executions, gruesome but considered part of the entertainment lineup. Talk about a tough crowd. Public baths, the ultimate social club. Not all entertainment was about blood and chaos. Romans loved hanging out at public baths where they worked out, soaked in hot and cold pools, got massages, and gossiped. It was like a gym, spa, and social network all rolled into one. Except everyone was pretty much naked. Theater and music. Romans enjoyed plays, poetry readings, and music too. Though their version of a concert probably involved less crowd surfing and more toga-clad philosophers debating. So whether you were cheering for a gladiator to win, betting on the chariot races, or just trying not to get trampled in the crowd, Roman entertainment had something for everyone. Religion, superstition, and gods. Way too many gods. Now, if you thought modern life was stressful, try living in ancient Rome, where every sneeze, black cat, thunderclap, or bird flying in the wrong direction might be a message from the gods. Romans didn't just believe in higher powers. They outsourced everything to them. Need rain? Sacrifice a goat. Bad dreams? Consult an augur. Weird rash? Offer a cake to a household deity and hope for the best. Religion wasn't just a Sunday thing. It was baked into breakfast, politics, and even your bathroom breaks. Yes, there was a sewer goddess. Seriously. Romans had gods for war, wine, doors, thresholds, beans, boundaries, the hearth, the harvest, and even mildew. Mildew, people. If you could name it, there was probably a deity assigned to manage it. It was like divine micromanagement. You had the big shots: Jupiter, king of the gods, master of thunder, top sky guy; Mars, god of war, and also sponsor of toxic masculinity; Venus, goddess of love, beauty, and awkward public statues; and Minerva, goddess of wisdom and knowing exactly when to ghost a bad date. But that was just the tip of Mount Olympus. Or, well, the Capitoline Hill. There were hundreds more gods, and not just Roman originals. Conquer a new territory? Congrats, you just unlocked a whole new pantheon of deities like it's Pokemon. Isis from Egypt? Welcome aboard. Mithras from Persia? Sure, why not? More gods meant more coverage, like divine insurance. And don't even think about making the gods mad. Forget to say the right prayer? Skip a sacrifice? Boom! Your crops fail, your house catches fire, and your neighbor's goat gives you the side eye for a week. Every major event started with a ritual. Marriage, military campaign, business deal. Nobody made a move without checking the cosmic vibes first. And if you're picturing serene temples and peaceful chants, nope. Think incense smoke, chanting priests in pointy hats, animals being sacrificed in public, and augurs studying bird guts like they were stock charts. The chicken didn't eat today. Cancel the campaign. That's bad news. That was actual Roman military planning. On the home front, every house had its lairs and penates. Basically, your personal team of spirit roommates. These little household gods lived in a shrine near the kitchen and got daily offerings of food, wine, and burnt crumbs. Keeping them happy meant your family stayed healthy and your bread didn't catch fire. Ignore them and you were risking cosmic payback. And then there was the emperor, who, over time, became part of the religion. Worshipping the emperor wasn't just brown-nosing. It was state-sponsored spirituality. Temples were built, statues erected, and prayers offered to living dudes in sandals who sometimes thought they were literal gods. Some of them even believed their own hype. Looking at you, Caligula. But religion in Rome wasn't just devotion. It was superstition with a capital S. Romans read omens in everything. Trip on your sandal? Don't go outside today. A dog howled at night? Bad juju. Someone sneezed during a sacrifice? Start over, folks. Some even carried lucky charms, like phallic amulets. Yep, tiny magical penises. Nothing says divine protection like a golden wiener on a string. And in case the gods didn't respond fast enough, curses. Oh, the curses. Romans loved writing angry, petty curses on lead tablets and tossing them into wells, tombs, or temples. May Marcus drop his wine, lose his sandals, and get explosive diarrhea forever. That kind of thing. Ancient Yelp reviews, basically. In short, Roman religion was a swirling mess of belief, fear, tradition, power, politics, and a deep, almost obsessive need to keep every supernatural box checked. The gods were everywhere, watching, judging, and occasionally throwing lightning bolts. Or at least, making sure you tripped at just the wrong time. So next time you knock on wood or throw salt over your shoulder, remember, you're just one layer short of being Roman. All right, imagine this. It's sunrise in ancient Rome. The air smells like charcoal, wet stone, and regret. Somewhere, a rooster is screaming like it owes back taxes. Welcome to another totally average day in the Eternal City. Let's follow a regular Roman from dawn till dusk. Not an emperor, not a senator. Just a guy, or gal, trying to make it through the day without getting trampled by a mule or drafted into something unpleasant. 5:30 a.m. Rise and shine. Kinda there are no alarm clocks, but who needs one when carts start rumbling? Bakers fire up their ovens, and your upstairs neighbor starts practicing flute again. Spoiler, he's still terrible. You roll out of bed, or off your mat if you live in an insula, and splash your face with cold water from a jug that's questionably clean. Deodorant? Try a dab of oil and maybe some incense if you're feeling fancy. Romans didn't exactly shower daily. It was more scrape and spritz than soap and rinse. Toothpaste? Crushed bones and oyster shells. Tastes like ocean and regret. 6:30 a.m. Breakfast of, mostly, champions. Breakfast is basic. We're talking bread, maybe dipped in wine, or if you're feeling fancy, some olives or dates. Coffee? Nope. Romans powered through mornings on sheer willpower and carbs. Your options were wine or more wine, which might explain Roman decision-making sometimes. If you're rich, a servant brings you food. If you're poor, grab bread on your way out and pray the bakery hasn't burned down. Again. 7:30 a.m. Work, glorious work. Now it's time to hustle. If you're a craftsman, your shop's probably on the ground floor of your building. If you're a vendor, you're hauling your cart to the marketplace. If you're a laborer, good luck. You might be hauling bricks for some senator's bathhouse or digging ditches for an aqueduct. Slaves are already up, working since before dawn. They cooked your breakfast, opened the shop, swept the street, and are now trying to avoid getting yelled at. Again. If you're elite, you work by arguing in the forum, managing your estates from a reclining couch, or delivering long speeches that no one asked for. 11:00 a.m. Business, politics, and petty drama. By now the forum is popping. Deals are being made, bribes passed discreetly, and lawyers are shouting way too dramatically about stolen chickens. You might stop by a bathhouse for a quick rinse or a full gossip session. Visit a shrine to bribe a god for good luck, or head to court to defend yourself because your neighbor swears you stole his goat. And hey, maybe you did. 1:00 p.m. Lunchish. Lunch is usually leftovers or something cold. Maybe cheese, bread, fruit, or a bit of lentil stew. No microwaves, no Uber Eats. You grab what you can, maybe from a street vendor if you're on the go. Just avoid anything that smells too fishy, because it probably is. After lunch, some Romans take a nap. Yes, siesta style. Because even in ancient Rome, everyone hit that post-carb wall. 3:00 p.m. The heat hits, the pace slows. The afternoon is slower. Most serious business wraps by now. Shops stay open, but people drift towards shade, fountains, or taverns. If you're rich, it's time for a stroll in the garden, a reading from your favorite philosopher, or supervising someone else doing actual work. If you're poor, you keep hustling until sunset. Laundry, construction, deliveries, street sweeping, you name it. 5:30 p.m. Bath time, it'll prime time. Now we're talking. Bathhouses were the Roman version of happy hour. You start with a workout in the palestra, that's an open-air gym, then hit the hot room, warm room, and finally the cold plunge. Somewhere in between you get oiled, scraped, and possibly insulted by someone with better abs. Bathhouses were social HQ. Deals were struck, gossip flowed like wine, and no one wore pants. You didn't just get clean. You networked, flexed, flirted, and maybe heard the latest scandal about that one senator and the dancer with 2 pet monkeys. 7 o'clock p.m. Dinner and drama. Dinner time. If you're elite, this means a feast. Multiple courses, exotic dishes, hello flamingo tongue, music, poetry readings, and drunk debates about whether life is pain or just mildly disappointing. Guests recline on couches, slaves serve delicacies, and someone always brings up politics after the second cup of wine. If you're poor, you get porridge, or stew, or bread with, brace yourself, garum, again, on everything. The Roman condiment MVP, whether you liked it or not. 9 p.m. After dark shenanigans. The streets quiet down, torches flicker. Rich folks are still partying, but everyone else winds down. Maybe a last trip to the fountain, a quick temple visit, or a stop at a tavern where someone's playing a sad song on a lyre and someone else is arm wrestling for wine money. There are no street lights, so walking home is a gamble. You might get mugged, step in something gross, or walk into a surprise animal sacrifice. Ancient Rome. Never boring. Midnight. Sleep. Kinda back home, you roll up in your cloak or on your mat, listening to the sounds of snoring, arguing, dogs barking, and some guy in the next insula singing about lost love and fermented fish sauce. You survived another day. No central heating, no running water, and your ceiling might literally collapse. But hey, you're living La Vida Roma. Tomorrow, same chaos, different tunic. Work and social classes. All right, let's talk about the grind in ancient Rome. Because while history books love to focus on emperors lounging in marble villas, the real engine of the Roman Empire was a sweaty, calloused, overworked mass of humanity, just trying to make it to payday, if they even got paid. Social class in Rome wasn't just a label. It was your life script. You were either born into privilege, born into debt, or born into please don't look at me poverty. Moving up the social ladder? Good luck. It was possible, but about as rare as a senator skipping his afternoon wine bath. Let's break it down. At the top, the elite club, the patricians, Rome's OG aristocrats, old money. These folks traced their family trees back to mythical founders and treated humility like a contagious disease. They owned land, ran for office, and acted like they personally knew Jupiter. Most had never worked a day in their life, and they were very proud of that. Then came the equestrians, a sort of Roman upper middle class, originally the dudes who could afford horses for battle. By the empire, they were bankers, tax collectors, and shady business moguls. Basically, rich, not royal, but still smug. These upper crusts didn't work in the modern sense. Their job was to own stuff and have opinions about it. If they lifted anything heavier than a scroll, it was a bad day. The middle ground. The plebeians, these were your average Roman citizens. Farmers, bakers, blacksmiths, merchants, soldiers, street performers. Anyone who wasn't rich but wasn't enslaved. Some plebeians made decent money and even owned property. Others scraped by with side gigs and prayers to Mercury, the god of hustle. Their work was hard, honest, and absolutely necessary. Without them, Rome would have collapsed faster than a toga in the rain. A lot of these folks also served in the military. And after 20-plus years of campaigning and not dying, a real feat, they could retire with land, a pension, and maybe a little clout, if they didn't spend it all on wine first. Freedmen, former slaves, new hustlers. Next up, the freedmen. These were former slaves who'd been freed either by their masters or by buying their own freedom. Which, wow, imagine working off yourself as debt. Freedmen couldn't hold political office, but they could own businesses, build wealth, and even become rich. Some of them climbed surprisingly high. One even became the right-hand man of Emperor Nero, and probably regretted it. Still, there was always a little social asterisk by their name, like, "Oh, he's successful, but used to be property." At the bottom, slaves. And then, the largest part of the Roman workforce, slaves. Enslaved people ran everything. They worked in households, fields, mines, hell on earth, kitchens, offices, and even temples. Educated Greek slaves might tutor your kids or write your poems. Others hauled bricks or rowed ships until their backs gave out. Some were treated well, others not so much. Rome didn't have a universal idea of human rights for slaves. It had auctions. If you were captured in war, born into slavery, or just unlucky, you could find yourself mopping the vomit off a senator's sandals for the rest of your life. And yet, some slaves could earn or be granted freedom. And once freed, they entered that middle zone of freedmen, starting the whole climb from the bottom once more. Women, the invisible workforce. Roman women technically didn't work, at least not in the records. But they ran households, managed family businesses, raised armies of kids, and occasionally dabbled in everything from midwifery to real estate. Wealthy women could wield influence behind the scenes. Poor women worked in markets, made textiles, sold snacks, or took whatever jobs they could get. No rights to vote, limited property rights, and zero say in politics. But plenty of hustle behind the curtain. Work hours and benefits? LOL. The idea of a 9 to 5? Dream on. Most Romans worked from sunup to sundown. Unless it was a festival day, and boy, Rome had a lot of festivals. Like 100+ per year. Sometimes it felt like half the calendar was too holy to work. Still, the grind was real. And for most Romans, life was a balance of labor, survival, and dodging whatever the empire threw at them next. Fires, floods, political purges, or surprise tax hikes. So yeah, the Roman world wasn't all emperors, orgies, and epic speeches. It was people, lots of people working, sweating, cursing, and dreaming of moving up a rung or two. It wasn't just a civilization, it was a giant, relentless office party, where only a few people ever got promoted. Politics and the Senate soap opera. Ah, Roman politics. You thought modern politics was messy? Scandals, backstabbing, dramatic speeches, surprise assassinations. Welcome to ancient Rome, baby, where every day was a new episode of Real House Patricians of the Roman Republic. Let's set the stage. Imagine a government run by wealthy elites, full of dramatic speeches, shameless power plays, and a ton of ego. So, basically, like Congress. But with more togas and less indoor plumbing. The Senate. Old men yelling at each other in Latin. The Roman Senate was supposed to be the brains of the operation. You had around 600 elite men in white robes arguing about war, taxes, grain prices, and how divine the current emperor was. Answer: always extremely divine. Originally, senators were advisors to magistrates, like wise grandpas with expensive taste. But over time, the Senate became a glorious mix of political power, public spectacle, and rich guys trying to one-up each other in the drama department. Debates could go on for hours, or days, or until someone fake coughed themselves into retirement. And the whole time, it was a mix of high-level scheming and middle school drama. Think Hamilton, but every character is trying to stab the others, literally. Magistrates, the elected few, with god complexes. Rome had all sorts of positions: consuls, praetors, aediles, quaestors, each one like a different level in a power-hungry video game. Consuls were the top dogs, 2 of them elected annually to share power, which went about as well as you'd expect. Picture 2 CEOs trying to drive the same car. These guys commanded armies, presided over courts, and got their names stamped on calendars. Seriously, Romans named years after their consuls. Imagine your name replacing the year, in the glorious year of Steve and Jeff. Iconic. And of course, you couldn't just become consul. You had to climb the cursus honorum, the ladder of political offices. It was like political Hogwarts. Except every house was Slytherin. Elections, bribes, banquets, and vote for me or else. Elections in Rome weren't about TV ads and debate nights. They were about bribery, family name, and how many people you could wine and dine before voting day. Candidates would throw parties, offer favors, and make wildly unrealistic promises. Sound familiar? You didn't vote in private either. You voted out loud, in public, in front of your peers. Talk about peer pressure. Oh, you're voting for Gaius? Interesting. Hope your bakery doesn't burn down next week. Also, only a small slice of the population could even vote. Women, slaves, and most poor people? Nope. Stay in your lane. Julius Caesar. The man, the myth, the murder plot. You can't talk Roman politics without mentioning Julius Caesar, the man who walked into the Senate and basically said, "I'm emperor now," while everyone else screamed internally. He was a war hero, a brilliant orator, a populist champion, and a fashion icon. Those laurel wreaths? Chef's kiss. But the Senate? Not fans. They thought he was hogging power, destroying the Republic, and, worst of all, not respecting the process. So they stabbed him in the Senate. On March 15th, 44 BCE, 60 senators, 23 stab wounds, and one of history's biggest betrayals. Et tu, brute, isn't just a line. It's the sound of a power structure tearing in half. And spoiler alert, instead of saving the Republic, Caesar's death just fast-tracked the Empire. Oops. The Empire. All hail the Emperor. Or else. After Caesar, things got weird. Augustus, his adopted heir, turned the whole system upside down and made himself the first emperor. The Senate? Still there, technically. But now they were more like the studio audience, clapping for whatever the emperor said. Some emperors played nice, others, not so much. Tiberius sulked on an island. Caligula made his horse a senator. No joke. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Commodus thought he was Hercules. It was a rotating cast of power-hungry maniacs and nervous advisors. Political survival in this era meant being smart, silent, and never standing near the emperor when he was in a bad mood. Or near his food. Poisoning was so in style. The people. Bread, circuses, and shrugs. What did the average Roman think of all this? Well, as long as the grain kept coming and the gladiator fight stayed exciting, most folks didn't care who was in charge. Politics was a rich man's sport. Everyone else just wanted stability, jobs, and for the next tax collector to not be a total jerk. Plus, if you complained too much, boom, exile, prison, or a very awkward public execution. So yeah, Roman politics was less Senate floor debate and more Game of Thrones, but everyone's little finger. It wasn't about policies. It was about survival, reputation, and being the last man standing, with a knife behind your back, instead of in it. The fall, or the reset. How Rome lived, fell, and still shapes us today. So, we've marched through the gritty streets of ancient Rome, dodged chamber pots, survived bad garum, and rubbed shoulders with senators who'd stab you for side-eyeing their toga. But now we've hit the big question, one every history buff, conspiracy theorist, and college freshman writing a term paper wants to know, how did it all come crashing down? Short answer, slowly. Then all at once. Like a bad relationship. Rome didn't just fall. It took its time ghosting history. Let's bust a myth real quick. Rome didn't just wake up one day and go, well, that's it, empire over. Nope. It was more like your favorite TV show slowly getting worse over 10 seasons. Until one day, you realize it's canceled and you're not even mad. Just disappointed. By the late 4th and 5th centuries CE, Western Rome was basically running on fumes. The economy? A mess. Leadership? A revolving door of emperors, many of whom lasted shorter than your favorite TikTok trend. Barbarian invasions? Constant. Internal power struggles? Daily. It wasn't one big event. It was death by 1,000 bad decisions. Plus, climate change, plagues, inflation, and emperors who thought more about personal luxury than, governing. Barbarians at the gates, and eventually inside. You've heard the names. The Visigoths, the Vandals, the Huns. These were the real-life game over screens for the Western Roman Empire. In 410, the Visigoths, led by a guy named Alaric, sacked Rome. The Rome. First time in 800 years, someone broke into the Eternal City. Big yikes. And in 455, the Vandals showed up and basically said, "We'll take one cultural legacy, hold the mercy." They looted so hard, their name literally became a synonym for trashing stuff. Finally, in 476, a Germanic warlord named Odoacer booted the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, off the throne like expired cheese. That's the moment most people slap the Rome is dead sticker on. R.I.P. But here's the twist. Rome didn't die. It rebranded. The Eastern Roman Empire, aka Byzantium, kept on trucking for almost 1,000 more years. Same legal system, same imperial vibe. Still called themselves Romans. They just did it in Greek and added more gold leaf. Even the western half didn't totally vanish. Roman roads, laws, architecture, and Latin stuck around like glitter on a carpet. The Catholic Church picked up Rome's organizational playbook and kept the branding strong. Popes basically became spiritual emperors. Charlemagne, Holy Roman Emperor. Renaissance artists, obsessed with Roman ruins. America's founding fathers, huge Roman fanboys. Ever wonder why the U.S. Capitol looks like a Roman temple? And our Senate is, well, called a Senate. Rome didn't go out. It just became part of the operating system we still run today. So, why does Rome still matter? Because Rome did everything big. Big dreams, big failures, big engineering, big mistakes. And in the process, they built templates, some brilliant, some flawed, that we still use today. Want rule of law? Rome wrote the legal playbook. Want running water? Aqueducts, baby. Want checks and balances? Rome had consuls before it was cool. Want epic drama and political chaos? Rome invented the genre. They figured out how to build a mega empire from scratch, and how to lose it by thinking it could never fall. Sound familiar? Final thoughts from the rubble. Living in Rome meant ambition and anxiety were your daily bread. You could rise from slave to senator, or get exiled for blinking wrong. It was loud, flawed, glorious, and human to its core. And maybe that's why we keep coming back to Rome. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. It reminds us that every powerful system, no matter how invincible it seems, is still just a bunch of people trying to keep it together, and occasionally making a complete mess of it. So next time you flush a toilet, walk through a city grid, or vote in a Senate election, raise a toast to the Romans. They gave us roads, drama, and a very strange fish sauce legacy. And somehow, even 2,000 years later, we're still living in the long shadow of the empire that just wouldn't quit. Welcome to the end of Rome. Or maybe, just maybe, the start of something new. Author's ending. So, what did we learn from 2 hours in a toga? All right, folks, if you're still here, first of all, you deserve a laurel wreath and a goblet of wine. You've just survived a 2-hour time warp into the wild, weird, wine-soaked world of ancient Rome. And unlike most Roman emperors, you made it to the end without being stabbed in the back. Congrats. Now let's take a second to wipe the metaphorical olive oil off our hands and ask, what the heck did we just witness? We saw a city where gods were everywhere. Fire codes were a joke. Fish sauce was gourmet, and a guy could go from gladiator to emperor faster than you can say, et tu, brute? Rome wasn't just columns and Caesar salads. It was alive. It sweated. It smelled. It argued. It built the biggest empire the Western world had ever seen, while running on ego, ambition, slave labor, and enough superstition to make a modern horoscope look tame. We met people, real ones, shopkeepers and poets, slaves and senators, bakers and philosophers yelling over pigeons in the forum. This wasn't just about emperors with god complexes or legions marching across Europe. It was about how humans, messy, brilliant, petty, hilarious humans, can build something gigantic and meaningful out of sheer determination and occasional questionable hygiene. Why it still matters? You might be thinking, cool story, but what does any of this have to do with me? Well, look around. Rome is still with us. In our laws, our architecture, our languages, even our sports stadiums. In how we govern, how we entertain, and honestly, how we collapse into chaos from time to time. And yes, even in how we post online arguments that feel suspiciously like ancient Senate debates, just with less Latin and more emojis. Rome teaches us that empires rise, fall, and leave behind echoes. That greatness doesn't mean perfection. That power is fragile. That humans, in every century, are just trying to make it through the day, pay the rent, dodge their weird neighbors, find something decent to eat, and maybe, just maybe, change the world. Final thoughts. If Rome could talk today, it wouldn't brag about marble or military conquests. It would say, "We were just like you, complicated, contradictory, brilliant, and broken. We built things we didn't fully understand and left behind stories that no one will ever fully explain." And maybe that's the real reason we keep coming back to Rome. Not because it was flawless, but because it was so human. So whether you're watching this in a dorm room, on a commute, in your pajamas, or wrapped in a blanket burrito of existential dread, thanks for walking this ancient path with me. Hit that like button if your brain is now filled with Latin phrases and garum nightmares. Subscribe if you want more weird, wonderful history. And tell me in the comments, if you had to live one day in ancient Rome, who would you be? Senator? Gladiator? Street vendor? Professional bathhouse gossip? Because Rome might be gone, but trust me, it never really left. Valete, amici. Stay curious, stay weird, and remember, even the greatest empires start with a wild idea and a bunch of people just trying to find the bathroom.